Advisors ask me all the time, Libby, what should I be doing with my time when I'm doing a CEO day? And usually I will say a good CEO day focuses on three things related to your business, right? What are we doing to increase our impact? How impactful are the things that we're doing, right? Analyzing the impact. Productivity. Are we being more productive? Are we actually doing things that allow us to work better, faster, smarter, cheaper, or easier? And then number three, which I want to talk about a little bit today, is this idea of how can we reduce friction? So, friction in business is really any moment where I like to do this friction, any moment where something feels harder than it needs to be. It's slower than it feels like it should be. Something is challenging, something is gripping, something is making it not feel as smooth as it could possibly be. So, I want to give you an example. Imagine it's 2010 and you are standing on a street corner in New York trying to hail a taxi, right? Maybe it's pouring rain, you're standing there, you're wet, the little yellow cars are zooming by. Some have lights on, some have lights off. You're like, I think a light on means that they're available, but there's ones with lights on going by me and you're waving your hands like a maniac. Maybe I'm standing in the wrong spot. So you move somewhere else to a place that maybe you can hail a taxi and it's a whole thing, right? Finally, you get a taxi to pull over. You hop in, you have to try to communicate where it is that you're trying to go to the driver, and then they start to drive, right? And you're like, well, this is interesting because I know this happened to me many times where we're driving and I'm like, I don't know that this is the most direct route to where I'm trying to go. And my brain is doing that mental gymnastics of, okay, well, are they trying to charge me more, right? Are we taking all these random routes? Like what is actually happening here? And then I can remember getting to my final destination and the driver turning around and telling me that they only take cash when there's a sign in their taxi that says that they take credit card. Or maybe the meter said $30 and they're telling me it's going to be 50, right? Just a lot of bleh when it came to using a taxi. So enter Uber. Now you can stand inside the lobby of your hotel. If it's raining, you stay nice and dry. You know exactly who's coming, what car it is, where exactly they're going to pick you up because of the pinned location. You know the exact price of what it's going to cost to get to your destination before you even get in the vehicle. You don't have to communicate to the driver where you're going because they already know. Your credit card is already on file. It is a very frictionless process. And the interesting thing, and I like this as an example, is because by removing the pain points that consumers had, Uber has revolutionized the taxi industry. It's the perfect example because they don't necessarily get you to your destination any faster or any, you know, better route. Like it's the same service, just minus all of the friction. And whenever I'm speaking at a conference and I ask the crowd, like, how many of you actually took like a physical taxi here? There's always one or two hands, and I'll cut them a little slack because literally at the airport, there's a taxi queue and you can just get in it. It makes it a lot easier. It removes some of that friction, right? But the vast majority, 99.9% of the people will raise their hand when I ask if they took an Uber or a Lyft. And really, it's the perfect example because it's just so much easier. And like I said, they didn't get from point A to point B any faster, but the experience that they had, because it was such a smooth process, because of the removal of all of those friction points, is what sets it apart, what makes that so different, right? And so we want to look at all of our processes through this lens of client experience, through this lens of friction. So again, any point in your process that has something that feels harder than it should be, takes a little bit longer than it needs to, that's where we want to focus our efforts in our CEO time. So I could go on for examples and examples of what this might look like in your process. So let's say it's your client, this is a great one. So your clients are setting up, you give them an email, right? You have a great template email and you say, hey, here's what we need you to do. We need you to set up your new client portal and play around with it. Let us know if you have any questions. Also, download the app and get logged in. So your client is like any of us, right? Doesn't have a ton of time. They're sitting down on a Saturday morning trying to get this all set up right in their free time. and they sit down, and maybe there's like, I know with my broker dealer, they had a member ID. Even though we would email them the member ID at some point, right? They wouldn't be able to find it. And they'd send us this email Saturday morning, like, I'm totally frustrated. I tried to get into my account today and I couldn't get it set up. Can you send me this information on Monday and I'll try again? Right. So the client has now spent the whole weekend kind of annoyed, and not that they're letting it like eat them alive and that's all they think about, but it's kind of annoying that they made the time to sit down to do something and they couldn't get it done. So Monday, we emailed them, and guess what? They're already in the throes of their work week too now, and they're not going to have time to get to it until maybe Thursday or Friday, or maybe even over next weekend. So what if, right? And this is just what I want you to think about, is through this lens of client experience, through this lens of friction, how can we make things frictionless? Is it scheduling a 15-minute Zoom call with somebody on your team to actually walk them through the setup process, where they can screen share and you can observe them and make sure that they've got all the numbers that they need, that they're able to get in, instead of telling them to just log in and play around with it and let us know if you have any questions? What if someone from your team or you were to show them around and say, hey, here's where you can find your statements. Here's where you can go to get your tax forms. Here's let's go ahead and create nicknames for your accounts right now together. Let me show you how to do that. Okay, great. Go ahead and let's get that app downloaded on your phone and get you logged in before I hop off the call. Right? So that's just a simple example, and I mean, really, any point in the process, you can come up with a way to remove some of the friction to improve that client experience. I'd love for you to share below this video maybe something that you've done to help inspire other advisors that removed the friction in some area of the process. And that could be on your end from the business perspective, behind the scenes, something that made it better, smarter, faster, easier, or something that made the client experience better. But when you sit down on those CEO days, that's one of the three things that I'd love for you to focus on, is how can I pick a part of my business and really be intentional about reducing the friction for my team or for our clients.